Snowstorm had come out of nowhere, blanketing the forest in thick layers of white. David Parker gasped under his breath as his car struggled up the icy mountain road. He had been on his way to a business meeting in a nearby town, but the storm made it impossible to continue. His phone showed one bar of service, just enough to search for nearby accommodations. That's when he found it, an emergency Airbnb listing for a cabin not far from his location. The picture showed a modest but cozy cabin and a host, someone named Jonas. He promised it was fully stocked with supplies. The listing seemed odd. There was no reviews and the price was suspiciously low. But with the storm worsening, David had little choice. The man who met David at the caverns wasn't what he expected. Jonas was all gone, hollow cheeks and jittery movement. He wore a threadbare coat, looked far too thin for the weather. "You'll be safe here," Jonas said, his voice shaky as he handed over the keys. "But don't answer to the door if anyone knocks, no matter what." David frowned. "What do you mean?" Jonas avoided his gaze, mumbling something about wild animals, before hurrying off into the storm, leaving David alone in the cabin. The cabin was quaint, eerily silent, surrounded by the dense snow-covered forest. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but the fireplace provided some warmth. David tried to shake off the unease left by Jones's warning. Around midnight, just as he was dozing off on the worn-out coach, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock. David froze. Jones's words echoed in his mind. "Don't answer the door." Again he heard it. Knock, knock. The knocks grew louder, more insistent, against his better judgment. David grabbed a flashlight and approached the door. "Who's there?" He called, his voice trembling. No answer. Cautiously he peeked through the window. Beside the door, two children stood on the porch. A boy and a girl. They looked about 10 years old, dressed in old-fashioned winter clothes, their faces pale. "Can we come in?" the girl asked, her voice flat and emotionless. "We're cold," the boy added, staring directly at the door. Something wasn't right. Their skin was too pale, their movements too still, and the eyes were completely black, like polished obsidian. David stumbled back, his heart skipped a beat. "We won't hurt you," the girl said, her voice now muffled through the door. "Please let us in." David backed away, grabbing his phone. He tried calling for help, but there was no signal. The knocking resumed, louder this time, more insistent, and more manly-like. Knock, knock. Children's voices became more demanding. "We just need to come in for a little while. You don't want to leave us out here, do you?" David felt the temperature in the room drop. His breath came out of invisible puffs, and the fire in the heart dimed. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of the room, twisting unnaturally. He barricaded the door with a chair and backed into the kitchen, clutching a knife he had found in one of the drawers. Knocking stopped. For a moment the cabin was silent except for the wind outside. David dared to hope they had gone, but then the girls' voices came back from the back of the cabin. "We're already inside." When the storm cleared the next day, a local ranger found David's car abandoned on the side of the road. The cabin was empty, its door hanging open, snow piled inside. David was never seen again. Locals in the nearby town whispered about the black-eyed children, strange figures that appeared during storms, always asking to be let in. No one knew what happened to those who said yes, but the stories were always the same. Strange noises, chilling cold, and disappearances. As for Jonas, he was never heard from again. His listing on Airbnb vanished, leaving no trace of the cabin or its location. The forest remained and remains quiet most winters, but travelers who stray too far during storms sometimes report seeing two children standing in the snow, their black eyes reflecting no light, waiting patiently to be invited inside. Richard never expected his life to unravel in the dead of night. He was a mechanic from Ohio, living a simple, unremarkable life until the nightmares began. It started as sleep paralysis. Richard would wake in the middle of the night, unable to move, a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. It wasn't the paralysis that terrified him, it was the figure. He just stood there, Richard recalls. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I felt it, this unbearable pressure, like he was staring right into my soul. Night after night, the Hat Man returned. Richard's one peaceful nights became a waking nightmare, and then the visits escalated. Soon, it wasn't just the steering sleep paralysis. The Hat Man began appearing in the corners of his vision, during the day, at work, while driving, even in crowded places. It was like he was always there, just out of reach. Richard says friends and family noticed the change. Richard, once ongoing and cheerful, became reclusive and paranoid. He stopped sleeping, afraid of what he might see if he closed his eyes. He quoted, "I started seeing him everywhere." Richard explains, "At the grocery store, in the reflection of my rearview mirror, I even caught glimpses of him in my dreams." Desperate for answers, Richard sought help from doctors and therapists. They dismissed his experiences as stress-induced hallucinations, a symptom of severe sleep deprivation, but no amount of medication or therapy could keep the Hat Man away. What Richard discovered sent shivers down his spine. Stories of the Hat Man weren't unique to him. Accounts of shadowy figures with a wide-brimmed hat spanned continents and decades. Some believed he was a manifestation of trauma, while others were convinced he was something far darker, a harbinger of doom or a collector of souls. Richard's story doesn't have a happy ending. The Hat Man didn't disappear. To this day, Richard still sees him lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting. For Richard, the nightmare never ends, and he's not alone. Perhaps tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you might catch a glimpse of him too, in the corner of your room, just beyond the edge of the light. Yuki was a cheerful 12-year-old spending her summer vacation at her grandparents' house in the countryside. The village was serene, a world away from bustling city where she lived, but that summer would be her last. Stay close to the house after dark, her grandmother warned. Yuki. Yuki brushed it off as an old superstition, but then she heard it. The sound was rhythmic, almost melancholic. Curious, Yuki slid open the screen door and stepped out into the garden. The air was cool. Suddenly silence overdrew the atmosphere, and that's when she saw her. Hachi Shakyosama, the 8 feet tall woman, a legend among the villagers, whispered to frighten children into obedience. But Yuki wasn't dreaming. The figure raised one long, bony hand, pointing directly at her. Her parents knew the story. Hachi Sakiyama tugged the children, drawn them away until they vanished forever. They wasted no time contacting the local priest. The priest's effort seemed to work. The voice faded and the village returned to its eerie tranquility. But Yuki's fate was already sealed. Despite search parties combining the countryside, Yuki was never found. Her grandparents moved away, unable to bear the memories and the villages. They still hear the rhythmic echoing through the fields at night. Hachi Sakiyama, a nightmare that lingers, a reminder that some legends are just far too real. It was a crisp October morning, and the halls of River Mill High buzzed with chatter about the upcoming Halloween dance. But over by the back row of the cafeteria, where the too cool for school kids gathered, the conversation had taken a darker turn. "You're seriously scared of that old house?" Tyler sneered, his voice loud enough to draw a few curious glances from nearby tables. He leaned back in his chair, his trademark smirk daring anyone to challenge him. "I'm not scared," Emily shot back, her arms crossed defensively. "I just don't see the point of going there. Everyone knows it's just weird." "Yeah, weird, because it's haunted," chimed in Mason's, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might hear. "They say no one lived there since that old couple disappeared. And there's a screaming. You know the neighbors still hear it sometimes." The group fell in silence for the moment, the weight of Mason's words settling over. "Come on, Tyler," scoffed, breaking the tension. "You guys actually believe that crap? It's just an empty house with some broken windows and creaky door." Emily now narrowed her eyes. "If it's so fake, why don't you go inside?" Tyler grinned. "Better idea. Why don't we all go?" His eyes flickered around the group, daring them to back out. "You're joking," Mason said, his face paling slightly. "Nope, let's make it Halloween to remember. After the dance, we go to the old Miller place and prove once and for all that there's nothing there." There was a pause before Emily shrugged, making her unease with forced bravado. "Fine, but if we do this, we do it right. No chickening out." By the end of lunch, the plan was set. They'd meet at midnight, flashlights in hand, and finally put the rumors to rest. What no one knew was that this would be the last lunch they would ever share. The Miller house had loomed on the edge of Rivermore since the 1800s. Its windows were shuttered, its paint faded to ghostly grey, and the roof sagged under the weight of years. For decades, the town whispered about what might lurk, within. Some said it was haunted by the ghost of a man who had violently died on the property in 1872. His name, long forgotten, but his restless spirit is said to scream on stormy nights. Others recalled the tragic tale of Asad and Burim, brothers who ventured into the house on a dare in 1984 and never came out. Their disappearance had rocked the small town. The brothers were inseparable. Asad, the bold one, always had a new plan, and Burim, the quieter but loyal younger sibling, who followed wherever his brother led. One chilly October night, Asad dared Burim to explore the Miller house. After hearing older kids at the school brag about sneaking in flashlights in hand, they slipped through the broken gate, promised to be back in time for dinner. They were never seen again. Such parties calmed the area for weeks. The house was turned upside down, but no trace of the boys were ever found. The disappearance only fueled the rumors. Some claimed they had fallen victim to the ghost. Others whispered about secret rooms or tunnels beneath the house where something more sinister might have dwelt. The Miller house became a forbidden topic in Rivermill, an open wound that no one dared to poke too hard. But for Tyler and his friends, the legend was irresistible. The group of four, Tyler, Emily, Mason, and Sarah, met at the edge of Miller property. Just before midnight, a flashlight sliced through the dense fog as they pushed open the rusted gate, the creak splitting the silence like a scream. "You guys ready?" Tyler asked, though his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. Emily rolled her eyes. "Let's just get this over with." The house was even more imposing up close. A warped front door hung silently ajar, as if inviting them in. The air seemed heavier, colder, as they stepped inside. The floorboards groaned underfoot as they moved through the house. Dust motes danced in the dim light of their flashlights, and the smell of mildew clung to every corner. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, some old, others newer, as if others had visited and left their own marks behind. "This place is a dump," Tyler said, though his voice cracked silently. "Shh," Sarah hissed. "Did you hear that?" The group froze. Somewhere upstairs a faint sound echoed, a rhythmic tapping like footsteps. "Probably just the wind," Mason muttered, though he clutched his flashlight tighter. They pressed on, climbing the creaking stairs to the second floor. The temperature dropped further, their breath now visible in the beam of their lights. A long hallway stretched before them, doors on either side. "This is where they said Asad and Burim were last seen." Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Tyler didn't respond. He was staring at one of the doors, which seemed to shudder slightly as if something was moving it behind. "Let's check it out," he said, pushing the door open. Inside was a small empty room with a single broken window. On the floor, scored in thick dark lines, was a symbol none of them recognized. It looked old, ancient, even, and radiated a sense of wrongness. "This is a bad idea," Sarah said, backing away. But before anyone could respond, the door slammed shut behind them. The group screamed, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew colder still, and the lower, guttural moan filled the room, a sound that didn't seem entirely human. Suddenly, the symbol on the floor began to glow faintly, and the room was filled with suffocating darkness. When the police were called the next morning, They found the Miller house empty. Tyler, Emily, Mason and Sarah were never seen again. Their phones were discovered just inside the doorways, screens cracked, but still recording. One of the videos recovered showed the group in the upstairs room. The footage was shaky, the voices frantic. The last thing recorded was a chilling sight. A tall shadowy figure standing in the corner, his glowing eyes locked on the camera. To this day, the Miller house stands abandoned, its legend growing with each passing year. Locals warn against going near it, speaking in hushed tones about the ghost of the man from the 1800s, the tragedy of Assad and Buram, and now the 14-year-old who disappeared without a trace. Some say the house is cursed, others that it's a gateway to something darker, but one thing is for certain, those who enter are never the same.